So, Nigeria's economy was in the spotlight again yesterday as the central bank's monetary policy committee wrapped up its 299th meeting. Big decisions were made, but what do they mean for you and me?
That's the big question. The MPC is the team that sets interest rates and decides how much money should be in circulation, essentially shaping inflation, economic growth and financial stability.
And after all the deliberations, they chose to keep the monetary policy rate at 27.50%. The goal is to find a balance between keeping inflation in check and ensuring the economy keeps moving.
But that wasn't all. Now, the committee also stressed the need for improved security because when farmers can't produce food safely, prices would definitely go up. They also called for better coordination between the government's financial and economic policies to keep inflation stable.
And speaking of stability, they want banks to step up and improve liquidity in the foreign exchange markets. Plus, they warned about a potential tariff war, saying it could drive inflation even higher if not handled carefully.
No one wants to see that kind of war. And of course, I'm sure you remember the recent rebasing of the Consumer Price Index. The MPC says the updated CPI now gives a more accurate picture of what Nigerians are actually spending on, making inflation data more reflective of reality.
So, what does all of this mean for the average Nigerian, businesses, and the economy? We'll break it all down for you. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I am Victor Azu.
We shall be having another conversation in the second part of the program. Of course, that's on the lips of many people, talking about the IBB memoir, June 12, and acceptance of MK's victory. You want to either get all the details. Me and Ray John, great to have you join us again on Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live with the network service of the NTA. In the course of the program, Chukwudi Okolie-Ogbaja will join us for newspaper review.
Right, newspaper review is next. Let's take you there.
Alright, we have with us Chukwudi Okolie-Ogbaja for the newspaper review. Good morning, Chukwudi. Good to see you.
Good morning on the morning of a Friday that I really look forward to. I'm going to rest at the weekend. Hello, Victor.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, Oliwa.
You're welcome.
Alright, this is not Delta Broadcasting Service. This is the Nigerian Television Authority, reaching you live right here in Abuja, and of course beaming to Africa and across the world. So let's see what the papers have this morning. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. The Daily Trust newspaper leads with June 12, I take responsibility, and that's credited to IBB. Of course, so much here. You want to read this and of course pick up the I mean, you just want to see what's happening. All of that you can find on pages 3 and 4. Above that, no evidence, US aid funds Boko Haram. That's credited to the US ambassador, and that's on page 6. Next to that, Niger Convention recommends 5-year transition for Chinese. You want to get what that is about. Page 14 will guide you. And of course, Osun State is still in the news. Federal government asks Adeleke to halt Osun local government election. Away from that, the picture story, of course, is the big event that happened yesterday. That's, of course, the launch of the book by IBB. Away from that, Naira appreciates to 1,505 Naira. To $1. CBN retains interest rates. That's on page 19. Fabio Natasha, flash again. Okay, this is interesting. If you like taking a new dimension, page 10 will get you updated. 2 jailed for stealing lawyer's phone. That's on page 17. 2 Nigerians awarded 50,000 euros Commonwealth Peace Prize. You want to find out the Nigerians? Page 8 would inform you. So let's see the Nation now. The Nation newspaper is next, and of course the story on IBBs and all the papers this morning is also right here, but captioned differently. It says IBB, that's the kicker. Abiola won June 12, 1993 election. I regret its annulment. Poll cancellation done by Abuja forces without my authorization. Okay, all right. You want to read up the killers of June 12, 1993 annulment broadcast, IBB speech at both presentation, all of that on pages 2 and 4 of the Nation. That's the big news this morning. And of course, on the red strip, we have Ganduje Oshomole hail Okwebelo's performance in 100 days. That's on page 8, just below the masthead. Above the masthead, Osun Council poll will be illegal, says the Attorney General of the Federation. Will go ahead despite advice. That's on page 9. Beside that, heaps of sand used to block access to Benue CJ's office. There's drama in Benue, and page 7 has a bit of that. Remove trade tariff on Nigeria's imports. Federal government urges China. No proof of U.S. aid funds sustaining Boko Haram, says U.S. envoy. That's also right here. Pages 10 and 7 have those stories. And finally this morning, on the front page of the Nation, we have Federal Varsity Lokoja shot. That's on page 8. Wike promises business-friendly environment, also on page 8. So that's it. Victor.
All right, thank you. And I have the Leadership Friday. Of course, the IBB story is everywhere, and here it reads, June 12, 32 years after, IBB tells own side of story, says Abiola's election annulled in national interest. I challenged IBB on that decision that's credited to President Tinubu, and he restored my rank, did a lot for Nigeria. That's according to Gowon, and he's a charismatic leader, Jonathan. Right, and then the picture story tells a bit more. Above the main plate, FG asks Osun government to stop planned LG polls. That's on page 24. Drama in Senate as Akpabio walks out Natasha over seat dispute, page 10. And on the right bottom strip here, Khan renews call for Leah Sharibu's release. Details of that is on page 25. And finally, stalemate in FAC meeting over unresolved 1.7 trillion naira remittances. That's on page 19. Chukwude.
Yes, it was a controversial incident, more than controversial, come to think of it. The annulment of the June 12, 1993 election. Nigeria will keep on referring to that annulment. It's a good thing that Ibrahim Babangida has finally spoken up. It's just that the book is going to be judged in so many different ways by so many people, depending on the frame of mind you adopt towards what happened. He says, finally, which many of us suspected, that forces loyal to Abacha had a hand in, all that. But then some of us said at that time, I was a young reporter, some of us thought as a general, even if it meant danger to him, he should have stood up to say, no, this is not going to happen. But national interest eventually became the denominator of everything. Everything gets swept into national interest. It's going to remain controversial. That's the way it is.
So, but this clears a bit of the dust.
It clears, but it's not going to change news writing. News writing will continue to be the presumed winner of the June 12, 1993 presidential election in Nigeria. All this, he won it, he didn't win it. Remember, Wosu started it by saying he really won it. Because they didn't declare it officially, news writing is going to continue to be the presumed winner. And that is a blemish.
News writing can take away presumed.
No.
In light of all of this.
We don't do that, please. We are talking professionalism.
You can take it out.
We don't do that. You see, when the Association for Better Nigeria started all the shenanigans about, court injunctions and all that, we knew there were people sponsoring these things. Eventually, Nigeria had a story that was not very palpable. But it's a good thing that IBB finally spoke up. I think it's a very good thing because it sets the record straight in so many ways. I like what he did.
We need to round off because we have two topics, but I think we should round off with a quote of ex-president, which he says, "Some will agree with you in part, others will disagree, and some may even reject it entirely."
He went to the end of it. He said it's a Babangida story. You know, Obasanjo would always know how to couch it. You understand?
All right. Many thanks, Chukudi.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Make sure you rest very well this weekend.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get into our first conversation this morning. Don't touch it. Alright, welcome back. Just like the papers this morning, we're discussing a historic moment in Nigeria's democratic journey. Former military president General Ibrahim Babangida has publicly admitted that Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola won the June 12, 1993 presidential election.
Well, this revelation came at the launch of Babangida's memoir, where President Bola Tinubu commended the former leader's courage to acknowledge the truth.
Now, beyond this, we would also examine how this recognition reshapes historical narratives and whether it sets a precedent for political accountability in Nigeria.
To help us unpack these issues, we're now joined by Kasim Afebwa, former spokesman to General Ibrahim Babangida and an APC chieftain. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and good morning Nigeria.
I'm curious, did you also advise him to make this public? What are the implications, by the way?
This has been a project for some time. Quite a number of us have said it to him on several occasions that he should try and document his own history, at least coming from him. A lot of the things he has written in this book were already known to the public, particularly with reference to the issue of June 12. But his voice has been drowned, in the cacophony of voices against that particular decision. I regret taking that action. He has said it repeatedly. I accept responsibility. He has said it repeatedly. But now that it is captured in his memoirs, it will also serve, present and upcoming generations to also have a feel of what transpired at that period.
All right, many thanks, Kasim, for your opening comments. But now, with this revelation, what does this mean, in terms of our history and our democratic journey?
Well, don't forget that a lot of people don't realize the fact that General Babangida ran a military government. He was not democratically elected ab initio. So now that there's democracy, the gains of June 12 is expected or are expected to be entrenched in this democratic culture. What are those gains? Beyond the annulment is the fact that the government was credited to have conducted a free, fair and transparent election, which by history writers and all that was adjudged to be the best in the history of the country. And so for me, I want to take off from there that even though we are craving for electoral reforms, we are craving for so many other things, we are not seeing the impact in our present day, democratic experimentation, democratic processes and all of that. Elections are still being contested in courts. You finish election, you still go to court, you want to go and seek redress, you don't accept outcome of results and all of that. I think Nigeria and Nigerians should understand that election is more or less like a sport. You have to exhibit that spirit of sportsmanship, accept the outcome of results, and no matter how manipulated they are, and believe that gradually we'll continue to deepen the conversation around democratic experimentation. oftentimes people have written, have spoken so much on the June 12 issue from the perspective of IBB as his former spokesperson, and I have also been privileged to be given, a teaser kind of what transpired during that period. And essentially, even the book itself may not capture the entire details of what obtains throughout his trajectory as a military president for 8 years, but it gives an opening to quite a number of other stories and anecdotes that should naturally factorize his own leadership emanations. So June 12 has gain, and the gain is about electoral reforms. It's about the proof for conduct of credible elections, so that participants will accept the outcome without seeking litigations. The last time Nigerian electoral litigations have been rising from 400 and something, it went to 700 and something, from there to 900 and something. Today we talk about 1,000 something after general elections. Different litigations at local level, central level, House of Rep level, and even presidential, such that when they are sworn in, they are still waiting for the outcome. And we have seen a lot of victories, legal victories, so to speak. You take a case to the tribunal, you wait for the outcome and all that. Like the one in Edo now, the September 21st election, now we are still in the tribunal, keeping people in abeyance of what will come up. The losers should be good losers, and they should also try as much as possible to accept the outcome of election, no matter how imperfect they are being conducted and all that. Elections cannot be perfect, like a football game. You go into the field, you play. At the end of the day, you may commit a foul and there will be a goal from there. It will not depend on what the referee will tell you. These days they have even introduced VAR, as the alternate referee and all of that. So these are the kind of things we should inculcate in the minds of those who are ready to play the game, and not necessarily every time we are, carrying cutlasses and what have you.
All right.
So that,
Thank you, Kasim Afebwa, for your opening remarks. Let me now introduce Professor of Mass Communication, Abiodun Adbeni, who has just joined us on this conversation. A pleasure to welcome you again in Nigeria.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me once again.
But let me run you straight into this conversation. Now, IBB has finally spoken, but many Nigerians believe that this has come too late in the day. Does it really carry any weight now, any real weight in shaping, history or reconciliation?
From our own point of view, I don't think it's too late. It's good that it came at all. And of course, IBB occupies a primary place in the evolution, in the course of Nigeria's history. What he did with that book simply means the creation of knowledge, the production of knowledge towards sharing on an important aspect of the growth of the being and becoming of our nation. And we have seen leaders in the past who have been silent on their parts. Remember, Tunde Diagbo never, of blessed memory, never told us anything about his contributions, as it were, his parts, as it were, irrespective of the significance, that his coming made, when he did came. And of course, apart from what IBB has done now, the other president that I can remember that's actually contributed greatly to his election is probably Olusegun Obasanjo, and maybe to some extent go on through his institutes. So when we have leaders coming out, to express themselves, to provide insight on what transpired, while they were in power, it is actually helpful to the stimulation of knowledge and to the education of generations of Nigerians, towards what we could probably become in the future. So I think it's a mark of courage on his part that, is an octogenarian, and may God give him long life, and we do not know when Almighty God will call on any one of us, including President Babangida, but that he has finally spoken on the controversial and never dying issue on June 12 is quite revealing, quite educating. And I think, like we often describe him, it looks like scoring another goal. For me, I was one of the angry Nigerians in the wake of the June 12, because I participated directly in it as a journalist covering the election as it transpired. And I remember very clearly Area 10, the present headquarters of INEC, FCT, you know, that was where headquarters of NEC, then NEC was. I remember how we were waiting for Humphrey Nwosu to release the result, and it was quite disappointing as at the time they came to tell us, well, we're releasing the results in bits, sending it to our headquarters in Lagos, in Kaduna, as the case could be. You know, suddenly we were told that, you know, there was an order from above after Professor Nwosu had visited Aso Rock, came back, there was an order that the result should be discontinued. And I actually covered Justice Basi Peme, you know, judgment that night, somewhere in Wuse to one small court there, when he delivered that midnight judgment. So I witnessed those processes, painful as it was, you know, disappointing as it was. You know, I think Nigeria also deserves commendation, right, you know, for retracing its step away from the trauma of that period, and for a principal actor in the creation of that trauma to come out 32 years later is fine. You know, it's welcoming, relieving, you know, and of course it leads us towards a restitution. Right. You know, if for anything, I think it deserves forgiveness. You know, but again, it's an autobiography. You know, there's no autobiography that is completely clean. Autobiography is a work in public relation, an exercise in brand building, as the case could be. You know, so it's probably towards building his brand, but he's in trying to build his brand.
Building a laundering image?
No, I won't use that word laundering, but maybe brand building, public relations. You know, but in trying to do that, it's also providing education, providing information. To that extent, I think the former president of Bangladesh deserves commendation, you know, for helping us, you know, with an important part of Nigeria's history.
Okay, if you say building a brand, I think IBP is already a brand. Maybe you say rebranding. You know.
No, it's a brand, but you continue to build brands. You know, if you rest on your hours in the course of building a brand, it can deplete. You know. So you keep upping the ante, you know, so your brand will not be, your brand equity will not be depleted.
Okay, fantastic. Many thanks, Professor Adeni, for what you have said. You took part in that election. You saw how it went down, and I'm sure Kasim Afegba also took part in one way or another during that election. But you see, there are some people watching at the moment who don't know what happened. So even as we talk about this, I'd like you to just quickly run us through what led to the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. And now, with this revelation, what message does this send to politicians and those aspiring, you know, to go into politics in Nigeria?
Well, first and foremost, I think I would like to encourage people to get a copy of the book. Perhaps they will have a deeper insight into the factors that mitigated against June 12 elections. And coming from the principal actor of that period, who was the military president, such kind of information convey an authorial impression and finality, so to speak. All the other commentaries before they were at the realm of conjectures. And, you know, even from some of us who have spoken for him, some of us who have continued to interact with him and all that, the IBB is very hesitant in making some declarations, some points. In his heart of heart, he wanted an Abiola presidency. That I can say for free. Knowing him and knowing his kind of person and knowing the kind of relationship that existed. But we are quick to forget that he was running a military government. You have, let me say, I will call him primus inter pares, first among equals. You know, when you plot a coup and you are chosen as the head of state and all of that, you have to also be careful on how you are able to manage and balance, you know, the algorithms of power. Otherwise, you may find yourself in another soup. Because even yesterday, at the event, they captured the irony and contradiction of the whole process of military interregnum and what have you. Look at General Yakubu Gowon seated, who was torpedoed by a coup that IBB participated in, and seated to launch, you know, his own memoirs. Look at look at General Obasanjo also, who was also part and parcel of that coup. And by the time you look at the whole process, Muhammadu Buhari sent in a representation, in a former minister, Jaji, and knowing that IBB was the one that torpedoed his own administration, you almost think that it was impossible for them to even interact. He was detained, kept in house arrest, and for some years before he was released. And so when you look at the gathering itself, it means that, well, even though there have been issues in the past, they have already created, a way forward for themselves. It's like politics of no bitterness, let me put it that way, because there are some politicians that will want to deal with the other person with a long spoon. But these persons, with the role they have played in the past, when coup plotting was still fashionable in Africa, and by extension West Africa, and you almost think that this is not possible. But I want to crave the indulgence of the public to take time to do a lot of historical reading. They should be reading books of history and all that, because yesterday after the event I was interacting with a young man who almost had he had formed a position about June 12th. And I asked him, 1993, 2 years ago, how old were you? He said he was 3 years. That means growing up, he has been fed with the wrong narratives of June 12th and all that. And he has already formed an opinion, which he's entitled to. So a book of this nature will try to correct some of the misconceptions, some of the processes and all of that. And I keep telling people, power game is a different ball game altogether. If you don't want to take it, that's you. Both home and abroad, power game is deeper than what you see in the public domain. President Tinubu will tell you that power is not served a la carte. And so there's a reason why he said that. You have to sit back, you plot your graph, you design strategies, you improvise techniques that will guide you to navigate all the tractions in the process of acquisition of power. And at the end of the day, those who know power too well say power is a crazy aphrodisiac. It makes men blind to their real intentions. And so because what's salam around you in the process of rendering power is another different ball game altogether. You see all kinds of issues, all kinds of temptations, all kinds of trappings, rank-a-day, prostrating, eye service, praise singers, and all of this. These are all the condiments, that normally fire the spirit of power. And so, God bless the man who is able to live beyond those trappings and sees the bigger picture of, championing, his own power game when he's rendering it to deliver service for the people. But we're just taking up an item from that book, which is the June 12, which occupies just less than a chapter. There are quite a number of things that Babangida said in that book. There are quite a number of things that he did in this country. We saw the launch, and we saw Dangote saying that Babangida created the private sector in this country, and that one day they got about 30 licenses in banks for creation of banks. All the top banks we are seeing today, apart from Union Bank, First Bank, and maybe one other bank, the others were created during Babangida's government, and they are doing well, creating employment and all of that. Even the Abuja we are seated today that we are discussing here, it was created in terms of infrastructure. IBB literally built Abuja. And so there are so many things to take away. But of course, given the record of history, where you have one issue, dominating a discourse, it will literally almost obliterate all the other achievements you have achieved,
all right.
Process, yeah.
Thank you, Kasima Feba. Even though Yen Ray didn't ask me whether I participated, but let me inform her that as a student, I trekked from the mainland when the crisis started, the riot. I trekked from the mainland where I schooled to Surulere area where I lived, so I participated.
That was a good exercise for you.
Well, by the way, Prof,
yes.
Beyond the historical significance, do you see any political or legal implications arising, from this admission, could it also, affect future demands for justice and reparation?
Well, it can be one of many things, and of course, we are talking about history here. We're also talking about politics, but legally, I doubt if there can be any other implication, because we have moved on, sort of, and all freed naps are increasingly being assuaged. President Tinubu was an actor in the June 12, in the pro-June 12 movement. Is the president today, and it was full of effusive praises, for President Babangida yesterday. So if a President Tinubu sounded the way he sounded yesterday, is an epitome of the kind of feelings, the kind of emotion that is gradually resonating with all those who were probably angry with the man. And like I said, I was part of it even as a young man, as a young journalist. I felt bad, in the initial stages. It took me time to begin to look at him, President Babangida, that is, from a different perspective. And in retirement, he has lived a good life, sort of. He has played a very good role as an elder statesman, welcoming people, talking to people, preaching peace largely, avoiding controversy. So he has continued with his personable nature, and
don't you think there are people?
Yeah, excuse me. And that's why, to some extent, I've not read the book, but I've read snippets of it, But the only area from the snippet that I read, especially from the account of Olusegun Adeni, who read it, who did a slight review in his column, I am expecting a retort, from the Abacha family, for instance, because he largely placed the blame on the annulment of the June 12th at the doorstep of General Abacha. It can be looked at from a different perspective because Abacha is no more around, to defend himself. But I want to believe that, families, or friends of General Abacha might come in to provide a countermand, to some extent on some of those declarations. But again, it's also a mark of courage on the part of President Babangida, to volunteer those information, realizing how close, he was to General Abacha. But again, it also tells us about, the other dimension of leadership. Sometimes, when you are too nice as a leader, you may lose control. And sometimes when you are not necessarily even too nice, a leader may not be completely in control. A leader can be captured at any point in time, because that leadership position can turn out to be a cave, where you are insulated from reality. And in being insulated, your aides or your lieutenants, your trusted ones, may lead you into the direction you do not ordinarily want to be led. But back to what I also said earlier, it's an autobiography. An autobiography is an opportunity for an actor to render the account of his trajectory in life, But again, there's one commonality with autobiographies, You cannot get the other side. It's not a critical rendition of accounts, it's one that is out to portray the person writing as good. If, for instance, I'm writing my autobiography...
You can't say you are bad.
No, I cannot. If I lied at any point in time, or if I ever cheated on my wife, I'm not going to put it there.
Exactly.
But ordinarily, I'm supposed to put it there. If it's a critical
But what of
review.
the Abiola family? You didn't mention in all of this.
No, the Abiola family...
They could lay claim to being the losers.
Yeah,
they lost a whole lot.
The Abiola family has largely been assuaged. You do not forget. Even before President Buhari recognized former MQ Abiola, the influential billionaire that won the election, there had been some kind of restitution. There were relationships, tribal relationships between the families, and eventually President Buhari did what he did, and that was a high point of recognition. So I do not see them coming out to want to do, to want to seek a pound of flesh at this moment, in my own opinion.
32 years, I mean.
30, but I just think that we should honestly move on, forgive IBB, and of course regard him for who he is, a great leader who was very good in decision making, who was very personable, very creative. Remember, he was the first military head of state that adopted the title president, ordinarily a nice person, but again, like I think Afegwa hinted, sometimes, like Bertrand Russell said, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's only a man that is not human that may not fall into the trappings, the temptations of power, which can lead one to misuse it sometimes, or to be lost in the position that he's occupying. But he has done well on account of this book. I've not read it, but the bits and pieces I've seen is quite revealing and insightful.
Many thanks, Professor Adeniyi. From the way you have spoken, you have forgiven Abibi because you keep saying Nigerians should forgive.
Yeah.
Anyways, Chief Kasim. Did I say Chief?
Prince.
Yeah, I think there's Chief somewhere.
I'm Prince.
Prince, sorry.
I don't like that title, Chief.
Prince Kasim.
We give out chieftaincy titles.
Okay, good. Of course, the Isako clan, a very impressive clan. Okay, when you spoke earlier, you talked about the fact that IBB has come out to speak and it puts a finality on the June 12 matter. Former President Obasanjo spoke yesterday and he said, I quote, "You have written a book. It's Babagida's story. The book will be read, quoted, and criticized. Some will agree with you in part, others will disagree, and some may even reject it entirely." And like Professor Adeniyi was trying to say, this is his own story. Do you think that with this revelation and this book coming out now, it's going to create more controversies? Do you see it bringing about, if you like, more devastating consequences, for this country in whatever way, politically especially?
No, let me borrow the idea of Prof, my very good friend, Adeniyi, that when people write biographies, autobiographies, it is their own perspectives, the side that they want the public to know. And so Obasanjo's comment is naturally the normative order when autobiographies are written, because they are seen from the perspective of the writer, who is cataloging and detailing his own experiences, what he went through and all of that in the course of his life, so to speak. And what Obasanjo, former President Obasanjo said, captures the nature of life. You have the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have those people who are naturally well informed. You have the bystanders. You have the onlookers. And so in trying to dissect, the rubrics of what make up that book, people will form their opinion of what the impressions he has conveyed, what it means to them. And so we are not expecting everything to be swallowed hook, line, and sinker. We are expecting that the discerning mind should have opportunity to make an informed position. If they were left in the dark ab initio, they are hearing from the man that was part and parcel of that process, just like hearing from the horse's mouth. So the angle of the Abacha that he talked about and you raised, I think it's courageous for him to even say that, because I had known from time, in my interactions with him, that the blame, most of it, rests on the shoulders of Abacha. And why do I say this? If you read Professor Humphrey Woolsey's account, you will see that the last meeting they had before the election day itself, Abacha was, raining abuses on him and all of that, shouting at him and saying, you are telling us you are prepared, where we have security report that the country will burn if there was an election. And IBB now beckon on him and say, Prof, are you ready for June 12th election? He said, yes. He said, go ahead. The June 12th annulment is an interplay of forces, or was an interplay of forces, a coup within a coup that was predominantly anchored and, hatcheted by those who didn't want it to happen. That Babangida was going to hand over power to his very good friend, M.K. Abiola. And so in the algorithms of power, you need to balance the nuances. And people just see these things, the thing rests on his table. I asked IBB several, I say, when this decision was taken, why didn't you reverse it and say this thing? You are not the commander-in-chief. He just laughed. He said, you civilians always make the mistake of thinking that we military men, we don't go to school, or we didn't go to school, or we don't understand power. But we understand it better than you. The man who is the commander-in-chief is the one who carries gun. I don't carry gun as commander-in-chief. I'm a general, but I don't carry guns.
The chief of army staff.
So when you are coming down from your house, he said, when you are coming down from your house, your bodyguards are the commander-in-chief. If they pull a trigger, you are gone. And the man will submit himself, handcuff me. I don't just like the face of the president. He said it happens everywhere. I should go and read biographies.
Yitzhak Rabin.
Of course. He said it happens. So he said, what will you do in that manner? Are you going to say that you are the commander-in-chief and all that? He said, so you need to be looking at even your bodyguards. There is always somebody who is called a low ranger, who does not like anything you do, but he's doing the job. But how do you discover the Lone Ranger in your security bodyguard formation? So I have learned quite a lot of things from him, interacting with him and trying to understand power and the rendition of it. And so it was in Castina actually when that test statement of annulment of June 12 was issued, unsigned. And that was it. And for him, coming back, he already left Castina. I think it was the commissioning of the Castina airport. He already left, came back to Abuja, and summoned a meeting. By the time he saw the faces of all his colleagues, contemporaries, and all that, he knew that something was in the offing. And so he had to be careful.
That's
for
my
him to
friend.
stay alive to even write these stories.
I wish we could allow you go on and on. I was getting carried away myself, but it's the much that we can take at this point in time.
Yeah.
We just have to get on with our next conversation, which is on the NPC resolutions. Please don't go away. We'll take this backgrounder and we'll return for the conversation.
Of course, we need to thank our guests. Yes, many thanks, Prince Kasim of Egba. It was a pleasure to have you on our program.
It's a pleasure always.
I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
And of course, I want to also appreciate Professor Abiodun Adini, Professor of Mass Communication. I also know there's a new designation at the Bayes University.
Oh, this is fine
that's
too.
off-air. We'll celebrate.
This is fine.
Congratulations. And
thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you for being our guest.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so now we're ready for that next conversation. We'll take the background out now. Stay with us.
The 299th Monetary Policy Committee meeting wasn't just another gathering. Originally set for February 17 to 18, it was postponed to accommodate new inflation data, and when the numbers came in, big surprises awaited. January rebase inflation rate stands at 24.48%, a contrast from the 34.80% in December 2024. But despite the drop, the battle against inflation is far from over. The CBN chose to hold the monetary policy rate steady, reaffirming its stance in the fight against inflation.
That inflation is trending down and is looking positive. All the indices are looking positive. Foreign exchange rate, we all know, has started to trend down and is more or less achieved stability. It's been stable, and we've spoken about the differential in the rates down to less than 1%.
The decision, a firm hold on the key interest rate, a signal that the CBN is staying the course in its battle to keep inflation in check. The bank believes that maintaining the current monetary stance will help consolidate gains while avoiding unnecessary shocks to the economy. Meanwhile, the Naira's recent stability in the foreign exchange market suggests that the policy stance may be yielding some positive effects.
So our own objectives have been and will continue to be to achieve stability in the foreign exchange markets and in the financial markets. More investments coming in, which should spur the badly needed growth.
So what does this mean for the average Nigerian? Borrowing rates remain unchanged, inflation control remains a priority, and businesses will be watching closely to see if this decision brings the economic relief they need.
All right, many thanks, Musa Abubakar, for that background report. And to begin our conversation on MPC resolution, introduce Dr. Ladi Balakefi, MNI, Acting Director, Monetary Policy Department at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Pleasure to welcome you once again.
Thank you.
Let me also welcome here in the studio Professor Uche Waleke, who is Professor of Capital Markets at the Nasarawa State University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Victor.
Maybe
Good morning, Nigeria.
We should also mention it's the first time Prof is looking this way, and we appreciate it. Honestly.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
All right, many thanks. Also joining us for the conversation is Professor Yushua Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, and also the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academics, Kaduna State University. Many thanks for joining us, Prof.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. We're best to begin, but with the CBN. So I'll just simply say, attempt justification for the decisions of the MPC.
Thank you for having the central bank here once again. And the justification for us retaining, holding, is can largely be attributed to the fact that we had hiked for the whole of 2024. And before you see the effect of your policies, it takes a while. There's a lag period. Mm-hmm. So, and we were beginning to see the impact of the previous decisions that the MPC had taken. We've started seeing the results in the economy. And yes, you're going to ask.
Yeah. When you say impact, I mean, what kind of impact?
Okay, for example, the exchange rate is a significant way in which inflation passes through. Is a channel that inflation passes through. There's a pass through the exchange rate, and exchange rate has moderated. It's stable. The stability of the exchange rate is very critical to the Nigerian economy, because we are an import-dependent economy, and then we export crude oil. So and all the trade that we undertake, they are all denominated in the dollar. So once you have that stability, businesses can price their goods, knowing that the raw materials they're bringing in, the cost of it will be at a stable exchange rate. And also, we do not produce enough food that we consume in the country. So the fiscal sector, in the collaborative effort with the monetary sector, and also to ensure that they deliver their own duty as welfare providers to the citizens, they imported food to avert food insecurity. So that exchange rate stability that arose from the MPC decisions really helped in curbing inflation. You may see that headline inflation, so you can see following the rebasing exercise, inflation came down, but even if it had not been rebased, inflation would have been 1%, and then we had seen some gains month on month in some like on food inflation. There were some gains by over 2%, the deceleration in inflation on food inflation, as well as core inflation, because in core inflation there's been downward pricing of energy, because Dangote lowered his price. So it's both fiscal and monetary authorities collaborated, and we started seeing the impact in the economy. So based on that, the decision to hold, when you hold, it's not as if you have loosened. It's just that you're maintaining your stance so that you further observe how situations.
So what you're saying is that the tightening measures will continue, probably in the next MPC meeting. We're likely to see more tightening.
Everything that the central bank does and the Monetary Policy Committee, all they do is largely dependent on data that we have available to us. So we look at data. We don't come up with decisions just offhand. We have data that we collect from all sectors, the 4 sectors of the economy, the financial sector data, the external sector data, the fiscal sector data, and the monetary sector. We gather them, and then we do our simulation exercises, and that is how we derive the decisions.
When you say data, how credible, are these data? One would want to ask, really, because when you quote these figures, they don't really match with reality on the ground.
I will disagree with you there, because I even saw on Arise TV yesterday market women being interviewed. Maybe the NTA should go to the market and do some interviews.
No, of course, we have interviewed.
So, and what we've heard is prices of food are going down. Of course, there are some staple foods that are still up, like Irish potatoes, but the basic, generally, prices have been coming down. Prices of food have been coming down.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Balakefi. Let me get to Professor Waleke. How, in your opinion, will this decision affect borrowing, for instance, for both individuals and businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. I start by saying that the decision to hold by the MPC was expected. Yes, it didn't come to me as a surprise at all. And that's also why you find that all the 12 members that attended the meeting, voted to hold. On the strength of some of the reasons, she has advanced, because basically the central bank is looking at what is happening to exchange rate. It's also looking at the inflation expectation. Okay, when the central bank, for example, there is one study I saw by the central bank. A central bank conducts a study, a business expectation study, for example, where businesses are expecting that inflation rate will moderate in a particular year. That will certainly inform their decisions, not to further tighten. Okay, so I think largely the decision to hold, for me, marks the end of an era of an aggressive, tightening stance. So I want to expect that going forward, going into as we make progress in the year, and as some of these, macro variables become more stable, the MPC may even consider loosening. Okay, for me, I think we have seen, at least for now, we've seen the end of the tightening. Now, how would it affect, cost of borrowing? Of course, that when you have the monetary policy rate is more like the anchor for interest rates. If you look at the CBN's guidelines, okay, for charges, it says there that if a bank is lending, the cost of the interest rate charged is negotiable, but should be anchored on the monetary policy rate. So the monetary policy rate determines the rate at which banks lend. Because what is it in the first place? Monetary policy rate is the rate, simply put, the rate at which the central bank lends money to the deposit money banks. So if the central bank is lending to you at 27.5, which is the monetary policy rate, of course, plus 5, the corridor, okay, you can only lend money, at a rate that is higher. So when you have higher policy rates, it also translates to higher lending rates. So how would this now affect lending? When you hold, it means interest rates will not yes, they're stable, and of course but
there are other factors.
It creates room for planning. Okay, yes, these factors are, of course, there. When I say when you hold, of course, it is all other factors, staying constant. Yes, of course, if you hold rates or you reduce rates, okay, all other factors remaining ceteris paribus, you also expect that cost of funds will come down, and then access to credit, will improve, and that should also translate into improved output. Okay, so generally speaking, okay, low interest rate environments, promotes output. But part of why you find the central bank, increasing policy rates is when central bank has reason to believe that, too much money out there is also complicating, the issue of prices, including exchange rates. Because when you have too much money out there, part of it also goes to chase the scarce forex. Okay, and exchange rate rises, and just as she said, if exchange rate rises, you have the pass-through of that to, again, inflation.
So in your own view, you just said low interest rate promotes output. Would you say 27.5% is fair enough?
No, of course, is high. It's high. That's why I told you that going forward, I will want that rate to be, to come down. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, okay, if you take the average, Nigeria is about the highest. Ghana has 27%, interest rate. So ours is 27.5, and it's not just 27.5. There is, if you add the what we call the corridor is 500 basis points. That's +5. Okay, that means the lending rate is actually over 30%. That the central bank, gives to the
all right, many thanks.
So it is of course high, and it is high. I told you why it is high. It is high because of where we are coming from. The fact that over the years we've had so much printing of money, that happened in ways, what they call ways and means, and central bank had been increasing because of the general view that such would help to suck out all of that from the economy.
All right, let's go to Kaduna. Professor Yushua Ango, you've been following the conversation, and of course you're following the numbers as released by the CBN and every other segment of society. Quickly, just tell us, what are the potential risks and, if you like, benefits of maintaining the current interest rate?
The CBN, especially the MPC, whenever they are fixing this rate, like the first speaker said, they look at various factors. So they have looked at this, and again, like Prof said, this did not come as a surprise. So really, there isn't much risk. I think it's in order that we have, we're holding on, to this in view of the realities in the market. Clearly, exchange rate stability is something, and especially the different markets in exchange rate, the difference between them is less than 1%, which is leaving much less opportunity for arbitraging and all that, and round tripping. So that is important. The issue of inflation is also important, especially food inflation. I mean, it's obvious. Government policy actually is driving this. It's another conversation altogether, because what happened is that government had allowed for massive importation of food, to cushion the effect of prices and all that. So that has happened. So again, there's another dimension beyond all this. The recent results of election in the US and the return of Trump has made many countries globally to be watchful. I've seen many other countries looking at their MPCs and holding their MPCs and also holding on. Most of them are holding on, and a few are coming down. Now, this is because they know that some of these policies, as dramatic as some of them are likely going to impact the economies of these various countries. So really, what has happened is not a surprise. It's expected, and it's in line with realities. And like the central bank governor himself said, I think things are turning around. The various policies that have been made, in terms of reforms, from the government side, are now probably becoming, so we are getting some results. And with that, hopefully, with stability, we hope that in future we should see this rate coming down, like Prof said, because in reality is still high, relative to the economy.
Professor Ango, thank you very much. But let me stay with you for a moment. Now, the MPC appears to have called, for improved security because of its impact on food prices. So what do you think that the federal government can do to shore up security so that, food prices can get better?
As far as that is concerned, it's an ongoing thing. Just 3 days ago, I was in Gusau, an area I would not have dared to go to, before. So there is a lot of work that is taking place. It's a continuum. It's something that is continuous as far as security is concerned. But what actually caused prices of foodstuff to come down is direct importation of food, and licenses given to importers. And you remember when prices rose so high last year, government came out with a window, and I think they said 150 days window, that they will enable people, to import without any duties and all that and all that. Now, that is being done now, and that is what is really affecting the prices. Like I said, it's another conversation. There is a good side of it, there's another bad side of it. I mean, the immediate relief is that for those who are going to farm, to buy foodstuffs have come down, clearly. And the prices are continuously coming down. And and we have discussed here so many times, that a major cause of inflation is actually food prices. Now that has been resolved somehow, and it's continuing. Prices are coming down. Now, what will now that lead to in another way is another discussion altogether, because it has the other side of it may not be so palatable, because it means we are now depending on food importation as a solution. So security certainly is important. Security for farmers is important. And like I said, it's an ongoing thing. And I think there's a lot of improvement even on the side of security. It's not completely resolved, but I think, substantially there is progress in that regard.
Professor Yushua Angu would return to you shortly, but let's get back here in the studio and, of course, engage Ladibala Kefi, MNI, some more. You want banks, to step up and improve liquidity in the foreign exchange market. Just tell us briefly how you expect the banks to do that. And then there's a warning about potential tariff war. What's that about?
Oh, the tariff war is actually, as Professor said, following the U.S. election and President Trump emerging as the president. His antecedents shows that when it comes to trade, he focuses more on unilateralism rather than multilateralism. So, America first, that's the slogan. So when you say America first, you're trying to protect your manufacturers. So you will now impose tariffs against imports into your country. And by doing that, they are a global force. America is a huge consumer of goods, and they also produce. So, and they had been taking their productive base to other countries, emerging markets like China, Vietnam, South Korea. And China now started copying and improved on their own productive capacity. And their goods are now cheaper. So they are blocking them. So once this starts, these tariffs and trade wars is going to affect what WTO tries to do to manage trade wars, so that smaller countries are not hurt, bigger countries are not hurt. But when a country decides to go on their own, it's going to disrupt the global supply chain and it's going to disrupt the global market. And when it does that, emerging markets will suffer, like Nigeria. For example, the US, they have a stockpile. They have a stockpile of crude, and Nigeria, we produce crude, we export to the US. But with his own kind of policy, they are going to start. He's not for climate change and so on. So they're going to start producing crude oil in massive ways, and some ways are like fracking and all other models that you can use to get production. So which means once they do that, there will be huge supply in the market. Once there's huge supply, there will be oil glut. It's going to impact negatively on Nigeria because we export. That's our primary source of revenue. When there's too much supply out there to meet demand, and even excess, then we'll have a challenge. The tariff was also, as I said earlier, other countries are now saying they're going to retaliate. So it's going to disrupt the total global polity. And it's definitely, no country is in isolation. Countries are interrelated and interconnected. We are at the era of globalization. So it's definitely going to affect us.
Now, the MPC currently emphasizes collaboration between fiscal and monetary policy authorities.
Yeah.
In what areas is this collaboration lacking, and what can be done, to improve it?
Okay, so on the 30th of January, I'm sure you covered what the Central Bank of Nigeria did, which was the Monetary Policy Forum. It had not been held in 20 years until Governor Cardoso took over and said he insisted, he is very big on collaboration as well as communication. How do we communicate our policies to the public for it to be effective? How do we enhance and strengthen collaboration with all sectors of the economy? So we held the Monetary Policy Forum, and that forum we had up to 6 ministers of budget and planning, the coordinating minister for the economy, and his minister of state. We also had minister of trade. When we talk of fiscal authorities, a lot of people conclude it's just the Ministry of Finance. No, trade plays a big role because it's through trade that we can earn revenue.
Yeah.
So whatever they do will impact on our sources of foreign exchange earnings, which will have a direct impact on the reserves, which is in the purview of the central bank. And the more dollar we earn, the more it will stabilize the exchange rate. And Prof earlier said that it was the importation of food that largely contributed to the deceleration of inflation. I'd like to add that including stable exchange rate. And that stable exchange rate, the bank introduced the electronic foreign exchange matching system, which is called the B-Match. We also came up with the Nigerian FX code, and all this is to introduce transparency and ethics and governance in that space. Because in the past, the foreign exchange market was distorted. Banks played the way they liked, and there was no control. But now there is control, and with that control, things are normalizing. And let me quickly conclude on the collaboration between fiscal and monetary policy authorities. The forum, we invited academia, we invited the BDC, the Bureau de Change Association, we invited chambers of commerce. Okay. Everybody that was in the hall was carefully selected. The Senate representative was there, House of Reps, Governors Forum, all the other coordinating agencies, regulators in the financial sector, the insurance sector, the Securities and Exchange Commission, all were represented because there is need for collaboration. If the banking sector is thriving, we need to see that insurance is also moving in the same direction. Right now, the services sector is what is driving the economy, finance and banking. So we need to enhance and strengthen regulation so that we can get optimal benefit from that. And then also with government, by inviting national planning, when we plan, once you sit with other agencies and you plan, then it will enable government to know where to focus on to generate revenue. And then also with the fiscal authorities, it will enable us to know how to manage excess liquidity in the system. So we need to have the same calendar with the fiscal authorities so that to ensure that they are not, whatever they do will not impact on what the banking sector or the central bank is
So are you
trying.
plugging these gaps now?
Yes, we are. So we have, this is one of it. It was a really very successful discourse because we listened more to the stakeholders. The Monetary Policy Forum enabled the governor to hear what no MPC member spoke. It was just the speeches that the governor made and the Deputy Governor Economic Policy just to set the tone for the conversation. And after that, the governor took note of the complaints of everybody. And following that, immediately the BDCs were invited. We held meetings with them. And you can see the central bank has now created a model whereby BDCs can get foreign exchange from banks, so to reduce the scarcity. And then the fiscal authorities also, we've held meetings, several meetings with them on how we will manage our situation.
All right, many thanks, Ladi Balakefe. We'll pause for a break now. When we come back, the conversation continues. Please remain tuned. All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. And our guests are still very much with us talking about the MPC resolutions yesterday. And I'd like to get to Professor Uche Uwaleke now. Earlier when Ladi Balakefe spoke, she talked about the MPC coming up with the resolutions based on data, you know, from different sectors, if you like, segments. You know, I want you to speak to us about this data. You know, the reason I'm asking is because if you go on the street, you know, the average person will still complain about prices being high and all of that. Yes, agreed. Some would say yes for food crops that are currently in season. Yes, a slight decrease. But they would also say for example, you say you're buying beans at the moment, say for 1,008 as compared to maybe 2,000 in December. But it was never 1,008 as at you know, some months in 2024. I mean, beans was like 450, 500. So I mean, there's a huge difference. So how does this really, you know, shape this conversation, you know, and then does it really match with the resolutions that are reached? I mean, looking at the reality on ground. And then speak to us about, because she's also talked about the rebased consumer price index, you know, being a factor to all of this. Did that really reflect Nigeria's consumption patterns?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I read the communique that came out after that meeting, and in it, the members made reference to the December inflation figure and November inflation figure. They compared the two, and they talked about month-on-month deceleration. Whereas we had a slight increase in inflation rate between November and December of last year, month on month there was a deceleration. Okay, now they didn't compare January and December for obvious reasons, because the two were computed based on different bases. Okay, now you are talking about data. The one that just came out based on the rebased CPI, the 24.48%. Okay, of course, year on year. What it simply means, it doesn't say that inflation rate has come down. That's not what it says. It simply means that prices are coming down. It simply says that prices are rising, but at a slower pace. So when you find the inflation rate, for example, drop from, say, 25 to 24, that doesn't mean that you have deflation. That's the technical term. It simply means that yes, prices have rose or have risen, or prices rose, but at a slower pace. Now, if you look at what the MBS did, which the MPC concurred, they said, and as far as they were concerned, that reflected reality. If you look at what they did, I also mentioned it, I think much earlier. I said what they did was to update the price reference period and the weight reference period. All along, they were using 2009 as base year. Now, you will agree with me that consumption patterns have changed since then. So it made sense to now bring that base year as close as possible to the current year. And that's why they used 2024 as the price reference period. Okay. Now, if you look at the classifications, food is still where the pressure point is. Okay, but food now constitutes 40% of consumption. So what that means is that if you take the average household, based on the study they conducted, the average household spends 40% of its spends 40% of its total consumption on food. Okay. You also find that the same food is showing up in restaurants. Restaurants increase from 1.2 to 12%. So if you add restaurants, what is spent by way of meals away from home, if you add that 12 to 40, you still get 52% in terms of what is consumed. Okay. Now, in that classification, transport is also very high. And you'll agree with me that transport costs, over time, has also increased. So that classification reflects, reality, unlike what we had in the past. So if you look at that classification now, you find food, the biggest, weights. You have food, you have transport. Okay, you have the restaurant at 12, you have transport at 10.7. Okay, and of course you also have even health and education. They have also increased. People now spend more money on health and education. Recently I read about, just 3 days ago, the inflation number for UK came out. Inflation number in the UK was 2.5% in December. By January it has gone up to 3%. Meanwhile, the expectation was that it was going to be 2.8%. And to what was the reason? It was attributed again to food, energy, and also the withdrawal of the exemption on VAT for private, education, private school fees. So over time, consumption patterns change. So that is what the MBS has reflected, and that's also what the MPC took into cognizance when they also decided to hold. So I think largely data is what should drive the decisions that MPC takes. And I want to commend this idea of the Monetary Policy Forum. You can't overemphasize the need for fiscal and monetary policies to work in tandem, because the central bank cannot fight inflation alone. And do you know why? Because the factors driving inflation in Nigeria are not entirely monetary factors. This data now by the National Bureau of Statistics has made it obvious that the fiscal side also has a role to play. And that's why I want to ask them to keep up this idea of Monetary Policy Forum. And in future meetings, also consider inviting also the subnationals, maybe finance commissioners. They should be part of that Monetary Policy Forum, because a lot of pressure too comes from the states, from the subnationals. Okay, particularly now that what they share by way of FAC, has increased. So most of the time you find the central bank, battling with fiscal surprises, from the subnationals, especially when it comes to the forex market. Okay, so that is something commendable, and I want them to keep it up. The idea of fiscal monetary policy, collaboration, you can't overemphasize it, because as far as inflation is concerned, the two must work together, because there are factors that the government too must deal with.
Thank you, Professor Waleke. Let me head to Kaduna to see another prof. Professor Ango, with rising inflation concerns, what role, in your opinion, should fiscal policies play alongside the monetary policies to achieve price stability?
I'll just take it off from where Professor Waleke stopped. He mentioned especially the influence of subnationals. Now, before now, especially last year, we have seen it. I hope it will be better from now on, because what we expected was that since about 1/4 of all our foreign exchange spendings in the previous years was used towards importation of refined petroleum products. Now that has stopped more or less, because we have the Dangote and then the NNPC refineries coming to life. So we expected to see Naira gaining ordinarily, from that, and stabilizing. Maybe what we are getting is also part of it, but that did not happen much last year, because of the influence, in the opinion of many people, that it is anytime there is FAC, then people go with funds, to the Bureau de changes and all that, either at local government level or state levels, and combust so much, into foreign exchange. So that affected the stability of what we expected. So what I'm saying is, basically, we need the cooperation of everybody. If we need stability, that stability has to come from every quarter. The fiscal side are doing what they are doing. The monetary side are doing what they are doing. But we need the input and cooperation of every level, and we need the vigilance of everybody to to ensure that, anything in terms of taking advantage of the system does not arise. Perhaps if we do that properly, then the growth we are seeing in GDP, which is also going to be rebased, and the growth we are seeing in inflation, or a reduction in inflation that we hope will continue, we will see it. Now, we have seen reduction in food, or food-related prices, definitely. But then we have not seen that much in other sectors of the economy. Just this morning I had on radio, a debate, between bread makers and those who are selling flour in the market, because prices of wheat has come down, so prices of flour has come down, so and sugar slightly come down. So why are bread costs the same way they are? So what we are saying is that we expect to see a lot more in terms of reduction, of prices, but then for the manufacturers, those who are engaged in various manufacturing activities, they also need to consider that the prices of input have come down, especially with the stability of foreign exchange, and then hopefully we should see reduction in interest rate going forward into this year, and with that, hopefully, again, we should see further reduction in inflation.
Thanks, Professor Ango. Everyone, shares the same optimism with you. Hoping that some of these figures will go down, especially inflation and the interest rate. Many thanks. Let's return to Ladibola Kefe as we begin to round up this conversation. You mentioned earlier, of course, this is the first time after 6 consecutive hikes in 2024. It's signaling a pause, to the tightening measure, and you say, well, we're not sure if it's going to loosen some more or if it will continue to tighten, in the coming months. But just let us have, broader implications, of this current decision of the MPC on the economy of Nigeria.
Okay, so the broader implications with we did some surveys, the statistics department, on household surveys. We also did for manufacturers. We also did, the PMI survey. And from the survey, it's interesting to note that last year there were a lot of pessimism from households that inflation was not going to come down. But from the results we got now, we've seen a reduction in the number of pessimists. And the number of those that are optimistic are increasing.
Does that affect the economy?
Yes, of course. So, if you feel that things will keep going up,
it will.
No. Yes. No. Well, not that it will. Not that it will, but it will make you to take a certain decision. Like, instead of you to go to the market and buy things, you may just divert your money somewhere else. But when you are optimistic that prices will go down,
it influences your actions.
It influences your consumption pattern. It influences how you manage your resources. And then again, it's going to have a positive impact on the economy. Even for the manufacturers, we've had steady optimism throughout last year, and it has even increased. So it means that firms believe in what the Central Bank of Nigeria is doing from the survey. And we published the survey. You can go on the CBN website. You will see it. Whether the sentiments are negative or positive, we publish. And we've had consistent optimism from firms that they believe that we will be able to tackle inflation, and that the economy will be able to be on an upward trajectory as is desired to suit growth. And let me quickly tell you that, in fact, in the equities market, Prof is here, the all-share index has increased by over 9%, 9.30%, market capitalization by 12.49%. Also, the industry PMI expanded. So all these are positive signs that the economy will pick up in 2025. And even growth is expected to be at over 4%, and we know we will get there. We've gotten a handle of the exchange rate. We've had accretion to the reserves due to the active policies of the CBN and active drive for diaspora remittances by the central bank's management. Diaspora now have confidence in the Central Bank of Nigeria that they can bring in inflows and it will be managed well. So all these are positives all round. And I will tell you, Prof, talking about our current account balance, our import bill has reduced. And we have a higher surplus of over $6 billion compared with $3.92 billion in quarter 2 of 2024. These things have triple effect and trickle down impact on the economy. But this, you may not be able to see them immediately, but as we go further, that's why I did not answer your question whether we will tighten or loose. What we see, the direction the economy is going, if there's
depends
need,
on what you're going to do.
That's what. And also we have relatively strong external reserves. And in the monetary sector, money supply has reduced. If money supply reduces by 1.87% year to date, inflation is largely a monetary phenomenon. So if we can manage money supply, which we have done up to date as a result of the hikes,
but the MPC,
we have optimistic outlook for the economy.
The MPC wants banks to improve liquidity in the forex market.
Yes.
How do you expect them to do this actually in practical terms now?
They should develop products that will earn foreign exchange. Our banks mostly rely on government funds going to get deposits from federal government, or they invest in government
Bonds.
Securities. In developed societies, they have products, and that products will yield revenue for them. So we hope they should develop their R&D, research and development departments of the banks, for them to know which products. There is AFCT, African Continental Free Trade Area. The banks should look at what products should we finance that would be exported, that would earn us foreign exchange.
All right, because of time, many thanks, Ladi. But let's just give a second edge. Did I say a second? A minute edge to the two professors, to share their thoughts going forward on what the Nigerian economy would.
Well, less than a minute. I am optimistic. I share in the optimism. I think when I came here early this year on your program, and I told you, in my view, the worst is over. I think I have reason to believe that 2025 will be a lot better than 2024.
Professor Ango, I'd like to hear from you. 60 seconds.
That the trajectory is good. I want government to now, instead of relying on importation for food, to now do something in terms of supporting a local production by trying to see how they can come up with mechanisms that will reduce the cost for the farmers. That would be a good thing that will sustain the prices or the achievement we have had in terms of prices of foodstuffs.
Your final words as we round off.
My final words will be the audience should
be optimistic.
Be optimistic and be rest assured that the Monetary Policy Committee and the management team of the Central Bank of Nigeria are determined to bring down inflation and stabilize the exchange rate at all costs. And they will do whatever it takes to ensure that they achieve that. Currently, the governor of the central bank is being acknowledged as credible, transparent, because of all the policies he's been churning out with his deputies, and we are back to the global stage. They just returned from the first inaugural conference that was held by the IMF in Saudi Arabia, Emerging Markets Economies, and he was one of the panelists. We haven't had such for a while, where the central bank governor will be at the global stage telling our own story to the other side. And we are also now very active in bilateral trade discussion, which is part of the fiscal and monetary policy coordination, We provide information on the macroeconomy, and we also go with Trade and Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Finance to assure them that you can repatriate your profits. So the environment is good as long as the banking sector and the financial sector is concerned. So please keep on having hope in the Central Bank of Nigeria that we're getting it right. We're on that way.
All right, thank you so much. The takeaway from me is be optimistic. Victor, are you pessimistic or optimistic?
I'm in between.
Okay, many thanks, Ladi Balak, FEM and I, Acting Director, Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria. It was a pleasure to have you, and we hope that all of this optimism would actually bring about the Nigeria that we truly want. Professor Uche Waleke, President of the Association of Capital Market Academics, many thanks for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you more in this kind of outfits, of course.
Thank you.
Professor Yushua Anga, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Kaduna State. It was a pleasure to have you again, Prof. Many thanks for your time and your insights on the program. All right, so that's Good Morning Nigeria this Friday. I'm optimistic it's going to be a great weekend. I hope you are too. I'm Henry John, live locked on the NTA.
And I'm Victor Azu. Enjoy the rest of your day, and of course, have a great weekend.